Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to kick it off in a few minutes. We're just going to wait 2 minutes and then I'll turn it over to Carmen. And again, this is supposed to be very interactive. So please ask questions. Carmen is very knowledgeable and can help you with any questions and guide you through anything that you have.
While we wait, if folks don't mind, would you throw in the chat just what year you are and either what your major is or what kinds of things you're interested in? Or not, that's also fine.
Not all at once. Carmen, if you want to start taking it off, we can. And if more people join, we can let them in.
Great, and thanks, Evan, for being brave enough to put in the chat a little bit about yourself. And I invite everybody to continue to share as we go, and we'll do our best. I also invite you, if you want to put any questions that you definitely want us to touch on or to answer before we leave here today, to make sure that you get the most out of the program that you can. So, hello everyone, my name is Carmen Mezzera. I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We're the community of graduate schools worldwide that specialize in international affairs. About half of our schools also have a domestic focus in their country. And so what I want to share with you today are some best practices for putting together that application, figuring out what kind of school, what kind of program makes sense for you. We'll touch on paying for school. And then I want to answer whatever questions I can to make this road a little smoother, to make the journey a little easier on all of you. So to get started, the first question, of course, is why? Why might you go to graduate school? Maybe you want to go for the change in salary. The Department of Labor estimates somewhere between a $30,000 to $40,000 difference for positions typically spec'd with a BA compared to those typically spec'd with an MA. So maybe that's what's going to bring you to graduate school at some point. Maybe you want to master a particular subject. It doesn't have to be something with a really fine point on it. My master's degree is in international politics, which is still a huge field, but it's a smaller subset of the even bigger space that is international affairs. There may come a time in your journey where all of the jobs that are next, that would be the next step for you, require that master's degree. And so you sort of plateau with the degree that you have. Excuse me. And so you're going to need that graduate degree to kind of open up that next level of opportunity. Maybe it's because you really want the professional toolkit that comes with a graduate degree. As I said, our schools, the P in APSIA is for professional schools. So it really is about building that kind of professional skills, professional tools that you would need to move forward. Now, there may be some things that you hear. Often people say that would be the reasons to go to graduate school. Can anybody think of any reasons that they've heard that other people might have gone or that you might be thinking about going? I'll wait and see if anybody can throw those in the chat. Not seeing any. Maybe it's because your grandma told you to. She wants the best for you, and she really thinks this is going to be the next step. Maybe it's because that's what everybody else is doing, and you're not sure what kind of other things to do. So you figure, well, I might as well go and do this. All right, well, I would argue that you can use it as a vector or a way to move into the next step, absolutely. So I would argue that the reasons that are grounded in being part of your career journey, being part of your narrative, like being an inflection point or a chance to master a particular subject, are stronger reasons, are ways to help you get more out of a program than some of those other things, like somebody else who doesn't have to go to class thinks you should, or you're not really sure what else to kind of do with yourself. So for me, having it grounded in wanting to achieve something, having it be a leverage point into something else, is just a way to get much more out of graduate school than some other reasons people might go. As I mentioned, we are professionally focused schools of international affairs. So as a super quick commercial for the fields of international affairs writ large, we know that studying international affairs enables graduates to have the toolkit, to have the skill set that employers are seeking. It's a global perspective. More and more people are going to be interacting with colleagues, with coworkers, with bosses from all around the world. 95% of businesses' customers are outside the United States. Global issues every day impact the individual choices that people make. So we know that this is something employers want. We know that the analytical tools and the cross-cultural skills that come from a graduate degree in international affairs empower graduates to go into so many different professions, and we can talk about the many different career options in international affairs if that's of interest. And we also know that it's not just me saying this. I can appreciate that people say, well, Carmen, you get paid to tell people to study international affairs. Well, Forbes magazine pretty consistently ranks us in the top 25 for graduate degrees. And what's interesting about what Forbes rankings do is they not only talk about earning capacity and salaries, but they also talk about job satisfaction. And we're consistently one of the top for combining both of those things. And the National Association of Colleges and Employers put this at number 7, above a lot of degrees that many of you may have thought of or that other people might be getting. So we know that this is something even those outside of our space recognize as a degree that's in demand and is something that really creates a lot of opportunity. But no matter what kind of degree you're looking for, we think there's 5 critical questions you should ask yourself to discern which kind of program makes the most sense for you. So to touch on these really quickly, the first one, of course, is what will you study? And that may sound like a simple enough question, but it's really important to not just look at the name of the degree or the kinds of things that might be out there, but to really look at how a particular program is built. You may see 2 degrees that have the same name, but structurally underneath are really quite different in the core courses that you have to take, in the elective courses that you get to take. Some programs are going to be highly prescriptive. One of our colleagues here today is interested in law school. Every 1L does exactly the same thing. Every 2L does exactly the same thing across the country. Some programs are going to be really flexible and let you marry together lots of different things and lots of different interests. Most schools are going to be somewhere on that spectrum between highly prescriptive and highly flexible. So you need to look at where you need to be to get the most out of that particular program. So again, not what the degree is called, but really how it's built and whether that's going to deliver for what you're trying to master, what you're trying to get out of a graduate program. The second question to ask yourself is, are you qualified? And I promise there's no one magic number that's going to get you into a graduate school or keep you out of a graduate school, but it is useful and important to look at this imaginary average candidate that schools are going to put forward. And that's useful for 2 reasons. One, as you look at that imaginary average person, it will give you a sense of whether that school is a bit of a stretch for you, whether that person pretty solidly looks like you, or whether you're a bit more competitive for that program. And that'll let you make sure you don't put all your eggs in one basket and only apply to a stretch school or something like that. And it will also give you a good sense of whether you want to be around those people. So if you look at that average candidate and you think, oh my God, I do not want to sit next to that person for 2 years of my life, it can also help direct you to programs that aren't the right fit. So looking at those averages can be a really useful thing. But again, it's an average, which means some folks had a few more years of work experience and some people had a few less. Some people had a slightly higher GPA, some people had a slightly lower GPA. Averages exist for a reason, but it can be a useful comparative tool to understand how that school is going to relate to you. The third question is, do you want to be where that program is based? In our field, we're quite lucky that you don't have to just be in one particular city, one particular location. A lot of folks think, well, I have to be in Washington, or I have to be in New York, or I have to. No, you don't. We have schools in 18 countries. We have schools all across the United States, and those graduates go on to wonderful careers in public service, in the private sector, nonprofits, multilateral organizations. All of these kinds of opportunities are feeders into our space. If you wanted to be an actor, you kind of have to be in New York or LA. But in our space, you can really be anywhere. So think about the things you need to survive and thrive. If you couldn't imagine being someplace that's cold all the time or cold during the winter, my colleagues, as amazing they are in Boston or Minneapolis or other places, may not be the right fit for you. If you love a big city, if you hate a big city, all of those kinds of components you need to set yourself up for success. So thinking not just about the academics, but all of that other living experience you're going to have, being someplace for at least 2 years of your life, is really important to make sure you find the right location for you. So that's why it's really critical to take into account all of those other factors. The fourth question is, can you afford it? And again, we'll talk about the many, many ways to pay for graduate school, but this is not just about the financial aid piece. It really is about understanding your own financial situation, your comfort level with debt, what the total and true costs of a particular program are going to be over the course and the lifespan of that program. So not only do you look at yourself, but talking to the school about, what is the total cost of living? What kinds of opportunities are there in the summer for support? For some of my colleagues, like for example, at the University of California, San Diego, tuition actually goes down the second year because now you've qualified to be an in-state resident. And so the total tuition cost has gone down. You all are Texas residents probably anyway, but I always use the example of my colleagues at Texas A&M who are able to give every student in-state tuition right off the bat. So there's lots of different considerations that go into this financial piece. Some folks get themselves into trouble because they say, well, tuition at this school is here and tuition at this school is here. But they don't take into account the fees and the factors and the cost of living and all of those other things that can make that picture look really different. So understanding the financial situation is really a nuanced look at the whole lifespan of the program, not just one particular cost or one particular semester. It really is about the whole experience, again, that you're going to have. But I would argue that the most important question on this list is, what is the professional fit of that program to what it is that you're trying to do? And if you're not sure exactly what that is, or for those of you, I know some of you are already in the workforce, if you're trying to pivot into a new space, it's really about looking at how those skills and those opportunities that you're going to build during graduate school are going to make sense for what happens your first job, your fifth job, your 15th job out of graduate school. And it's not that you necessarily have to have one specific job in mind, but it's about thinking about the kinds of things you're trying to build or the kinds of things that you need. And if you're not sure what that is, one tip that I always give is to read job descriptions for things you are fantastically unqualified to do right now, but that just sound really cool. And as you do that, you're going to start to see some common threads, some common things that all of those really cool jobs are looking for. And once you have that, whether it's this job or that job or something else, these are kind of the tools I need in my toolkit. And you can hold that up to schools and say, all right, this one's going to build 2 out of the 5. This one's going to build 4 out of the 5. Oh, this one's going to build all 5 and maybe some other things. So it helps give you a grounding in the professional fit of a particular program without having to know exactly what job you want, before the ink on your diploma is dry. So these questions really are a great way to make sure that you're discerning between programs, because we know that after a while, all the marketing materials, all the websites kind of start to sound the same. So every school is going to be different. Every school is going to ask for different things. So it's really important that you follow directions and make sure that all of the right items go to all of the right places. Another tip that I usually encourage folks to do is, when you start at the very beginning of your discernment process, And we typically encourage folks to start to do that about 12 months before they want to enroll in a perfect world. So if you're thinking about enrolling in fall 2023, now is the time to really begin to do that research, begin to do this discernment. And at this early stage, it's important to start to build a spreadsheet or use an app on your phone or whatever you need to do to keep track of all of these moving pieces to make sure that every piece gets delivered to the right place at the right time. So from that early stage, you're going to be researching and discerning programs. You're going to be keeping track of what kinds of materials need to go where. And you're going to be working on your financial planning and thinking about your financial situation. Because as you can see, while all schools vary, there are some typical things they're going to ask for. One of them is an application form, an application fee. If you need it, there are lots of ways to get that fee waived. So it's perfectly reasonable to ask a school if they might waive the fee for a student like you. That's a completely reasonable thing to ask. They may say no, they may say yes, but it doesn't hurt to ask. They may ask for a CV or a resume. Those are different things. So again, baseline, follow directions and turn in the one that they asked for. They may ask for transcripts from every institution you've attended. So if you went to community college first and then enrolled in SMU, you may need those transcripts. If you studied abroad and you're going to directly enroll in a particular institution, you're going to need those transcripts. COVID has made the processing deadlines on these things much longer than they used to be. So it's important, again, that you plan ahead as early as you can to make sure you have all of these pieces to go to the schools by their deadlines. Some schools are still going to require standardized tests. I will say fewer and fewer of our schools are requiring the GRE, and I'm happy to talk about the GRE and the LSAT and the GMAT and any of those pieces if that's useful to you. But if you need to take them, taking them 9 months out can be really helpful so that you have time to take them again. If you think you're going to need them, even if you're thinking of going to graduate school 3-4 years down the line, and we can talk about that too, about breaks in between, your scores are good for 5 years. So if you think you're going to need them and you want to take them while you're still in school mode, maybe you take the test now and then you apply for graduate school in 2028, whatever. But again, thinking ahead, planning ahead is going to be a key part of this. You're going to need a personal statement in most cases or an essay. And we can talk about what makes a good personal statement. But the thing I want to stress is really that it's about telling me something I can only get from reading your story, your narrative. So many essays get themselves into trouble because they start with the same generic quote or the same, I just want to be the change I wish to see in the world, whatever it is. I can get that from the other truly 1,000 applications I might be reading. Tell me something I'm only going to get hearing about you, your journey, where you are at this moment, what you're hoping to get, and why that program is the springboard into this future version of yourself. That's really the critical way to stand out in a good way and tell the committee something that they can only hear from you and help them see how your application fits into what they're looking for. You're going to need several letters of recommendation. Schools will give you guidance as to whether what they're looking for are academic letters, professional letters, or a mix of the two. For those of you who are getting closer to graduation or have already graduated, it's important to think back about which faculty are really going to be able to attest to who you are, what you've done, what results you've created, and what your interests are. If you haven't been in touch with that faculty member in a while, now is the time to reconnect. It could be around an upcoming holiday, it could be around a sports season, it could be an article you see in the paper that makes you think of them. Any reason you have to reconnect before you say, hi, I haven't talked to you in 5 years. Can I have a letter of reference? Is really important. And for those of you who are earlier in your journey, thinking about those faculty, those people who are going to write letters for you as you go is going to be an important thing so that you remember to stay in relationship with them. And you're not that alum who calls back from 5 years and says, hey, can I have this? You have to be intentional about it. You have to think about who it is you want to stay in relationship with and be able to attest to what you're capable of. And then you're going to need financial statements to talk about qualifying for financial aid. If you want to study in a country other than your home country, you're going to need to talk about your resources. So again, thinking about the financial pieces at the same time as you think about the application pieces are really critically important. They have to happen at the same time, because too many folks get themselves in trouble by turning all this stuff in, getting into a school, and then saying, oh, wait, how am I going to pay for this? They have to happen together. So I talked a little bit about this, but because personal statements and essays are such a source of frustration for folks, I just want to unpack this a little bit more. I talked about telling me your story, but one way to think about it, if you're not sure kind of how to get into the narrative, is think about who you were. What are the work experiences, the life experiences, the schoolwork, all of those pieces that shape who you are now. Why do you want to study this? Why do you want to go to graduate school now? Why not 2 years ago? Why not 2 years from now? What is it about this moment that brings you to applying to graduate school? And then what is what's next? What is that future version of yourself? And how is that school, not any school, that school, the springboard, the gateway into that future version? So doing your homework, understanding how the schools talk about themselves, the kinds of things they look for, being in a relationship with a school, going to a graduate school event and saying, tell me what about the committee's priorities, tell me about the process, tell me how you talk about yourself. Reading the school's About Us page or history page, you'll have those indicators of the kinds of things they're looking for. And that, again, will help with the discernment, but also help you know what kinds of things to throw out in your essay to make those connections. Because you were going to work so hard on this, at a bare minimum, avoid some of the foolish mistakes that lots of other people make that keep them from being as competitive as they could be. I talked about this a little bit, but at a bare minimum, following directions will make you much more competitive than you would believe, because people just don't do it. They can't handle it. So at a bare minimum, do what they ask for. If they ask for 3 letters of rec, send 3 letters. Don't send 5, don't send 2, send the 3 that they asked for. Most schools will have the ability to check online what materials they've received. Make sure they have everything. If you think you've sent your transcripts and they don't have it, be sure you're ready. Maybe you have a spare copy, you can plug that hole. Make sure you're ready to just at a bare minimum, do what they ask. Similarly, have someone else read your essays, not just for grammar, not just for typos, although those are critically important, but also to make sure that the version of yourself you're trying to present to a school, because you've done all this homework, you know the kinds of things they're looking for. Make sure that version comes through. In most cases, the written materials you submit are the primary way schools get to know you. Not very many schools do interviews. So the version of yourself you're trying to draw forward is the one that the schools are going to see. So have somebody read it, a friend, a classmate, a professor, and tell you about you back. Do those things come forward, or is there some other narrative that's coming out and that's not the one that you really want presented? So be sure somebody else is reading it and looking for not just the grammar, but also the narrative that comes through. And that's the third mistake that a lot of folks make. They don't do that discernment about why you want to master something, what it is that's brought you to this moment, and maybe some of those hiccups along the way. Schools are going to see your transcripts. So if you had trouble the first couple years at SMU, and maybe your grades weren't where you wanted them to be, but now you've kind of come forward out of that, tell me that story. Tell me that story about this triumphant getting your feet underneath you and pulling your grades up. If, I don't know, a global pandemic happened in the middle of your undergraduate career and suddenly all the things you'd wanted to do didn't come out the way you had expected, tell me what you did do. The schools are going to see your grades in your transcripts. They're going to see the things you did and didn't do in your resume. So tell me that story, fill in those gaps for me, or else I'm going to fill them in for myself. And if something happened that maybe you don't want to share or that's really personal, then it's okay to, again, be in relationship with a school and say, look, there's this thing that happened. It affected my grades, it affected my ability to do X or Y, but I'm not sure where the line is between really oversharing this personal story and telling you this triumphant thing or this thing that happened in my life. And the schools can give you guidance of where that line is between oversharing and great narrative or great motivating factor. So again, having those relationships with schools is really, really important. One of the most common questions I get is, what are schools looking for? And again, it's not just one thing. That's why they want all of those different data points. On the whole, though, they're looking for your aptitude for academic success. It's cool. So they want to understand if you're going to be set up to survive and thrive in their academic program. And that's why they want to see how you write. That's why they want to see your grades. That's why they want academic letters of reference. All of that comes together to form their opinion of whether you're going to be set up for academic success. At our schools too, it's about your professional direction. Again, not about what job you want, but broadly about the kinds of things you're trying to gain out of this program, the broader direction professionally you're trying to go. So that's why they want your resume and professional letters and that a personal statement and an essay, all of those different pieces to add to the picture they have of you. But the other key thing that they want to understand is what can you contribute into the classroom that's going to elevate everybody else's academic and professional success. So all of those pieces of your journey, being from Texas, studying at a school like SMU, studying this, doing that, all of those things that come forward in your resume, in your transcripts, in your letters, in your essays, all of that are things you can bring into the classroom distinctly and are going to help everybody else have a better sense of a particular issue or come to move forward on this particular academic question. So all of those are contributions you can make and reasons why they would want you in their classroom distinctly. So it's really a mosaic painting that they're putting together. It's not a hard and fast line that says, oh, well, this kid's above here and below there, so out they go. It really is a holistic thing they're trying to construct to get to know you better and to understand how you fit into the larger atmosphere at the school and in the classes they're putting together. I understand quite well the joys and sorrows of paying for graduate school. So let's talk a little bit about that. And then I really want to answer any questions that you all might have. Unlike an undergrad, there are three big buckets of graduate school funding. One bucket is going to live at the school itself. And this is going to come, there are often specific deadlines if you want to compete for school-based aid that might be different than just general admission to an academic program. The school may have merit-based aid or need-based aid, and I will say there's always more need than aid. So even the need-based aid is rooted in the strength of the application you put together. Schools may have research assistant or teaching assistant positions, which are just what they sound like. Working with a faculty member to do research, working with a faculty member as they teach their classes. This is money, again, that lives with the school itself. A different pot of money might live at the university level. So these might be things that you wouldn't directly have access to, but because you're in relationship with this school, they can go to the Central University level and say, oh, you know, I had forgotten we have the Bishop Scholarship for kids whose last name's Bishop. So yeah, here's an extra $5,000. Or, oh, the university has a scholarship to attract more people from Texas that you didn't compete for initially. Here's this. So there are things that you don't compete for initially, but can come from the Central University as a whole. The same thing is true about research and teaching assistant positions that don't live with one particular school, they live university-wide. So that comes when you're talking with a school and you say, oh man, I'd really love to go here, but might there be some more financial aid for a student like me? And they can go to that university level. Some universities often have what's called tuition remission, which is a staff benefit, much like healthcare or retirement, that enables you to pay for a certain number of credits. That's how I paid for graduate school. I was working at the university full-time anyway, and then was able to cover my graduate school classes because of this benefit that the university as a whole had. So if you think you're going to need to work full-time, and I see that is one of the questions, that may be also a way to make graduate school affordable while continuing to earn a salary and healthcare and all of those kinds of things. And then there are lots and lots of external sources of funding before you go to a bank and borrow $1 million zillion. And as just some examples, there is graduate school funding for what you want to do after graduate school. Some of you may know about the Pickering or the Wrangle or the Payne fellowships that link funding for graduate school with careers afterwards at the US State Department or the USAID, US Agency for International Development. But these exist also in the intelligence community. They exist with private contractors and for-profit companies. Funding for what you do after you're finished. There's also funding for what you do between your undergraduate and your graduate degree. One of the best known ones is the Peace Corps has what's called the Coverdell Fellowship. So if you complete your Peace Corps service, you can receive funding for graduate school at Peace Corps partner institutions, many of which are our schools. So what you do between undergrad and graduate school can come with graduate school funding. AmeriCorps has similar things. Lots of these programs have them. There's also funding for what you do while you're still a student. Some of you I know are sophomores. When you get to be when you're getting ready to be a rising junior, the Public Policy and International Affairs program, which is accepting applications until I think November 1st of this year for rising juniors, combines deep training in the tools of policy analysis, in the tools of international affairs, with funding for graduate school. So you would apply to PPIA, you get this wonderful opportunity, you get tapped into their alumni network, and then it comes with graduate school funding. I have friends who paid for graduate school because they did speech and debate or Model UN or all of these kinds of things rooted in what you do while you're still an undergrad. So whether it's while you're still an undergrad, between, or what you do afterwards, there is graduate school money for that. There's also graduate school funding just inherently for who you are, whether it's the country you're a citizen of, like the Organization of American States Scholarship, that is money for nationals of any OAS member, of which the US is one. There's money based on your race, your ethnicity, your gender identity, your faith community. All of these different layers of yourself can come with graduate school funding. So for any of you out there happen to be Latvian American or Estonian American, there's graduate school funding for that. So all of these different pieces of yourself can come with graduate school money, again, before you go to a bank, before you go and borrow all of those funds. And for those of you who have outstanding undergraduate loans, one other deadline I want to flag for you, if you feel like you're going to be called to a career of service, whether that's in education, local government, state government, national government, firefighters, teachers, all of those different nonprofits, all of those kinds of professions, depending on your loans, you may qualify for something called public service loan forgiveness. But for those who are either in their careers already or just starting, for those of you who are still undergrads, the deadline to get on the train, as it were, for PSLF is October 31st. So if you Google PSLF or go to the Department of Education's website, separate from any of the other loan-related forgiveness or elements that are coming out of the central administration, this is a program that you may qualify for, but by October 31st, you kind of need to get in the pipeline on the train. So that may also be something worth paying attention to. The last thing I want to share before I open the floor up to whatever I can answer for all of you are some of the tools and resources that we have at APSIA that we hope will be of service. We have a ton of events throughout the year, including a number of things just this fall for you to start to build those relationships with schools. We have what we call virtual open houses, which are small group conversations around different topics. So next week, we'll have one on graduate school focused on diplomacy or international careers. We have them if you want to focus on Latin America or the Middle East, science and technology, human rights and law. All of these pieces are coming up, and you can find that list on our events page that you see here. We have a searchable fellowships and scholarships directory. So if you're trying to pay for study abroad or language study, grad school, research, lots of different ways to access resources. All of our schools have profiles on our website, so you can read about APSI members, get to know the kinds of programs they offer. We have the quizzes you can take to see what makes sense for you. And then because so much of this is grounded in professional fit, we have a career guide where you can learn about different fields, read some tips, find some suggested employers. And then we have an active jobs board where we post everything from, I've just put up like 14 remote internships, all the way up to faculty positions and postdoctoral programs and all of that kind of stuff and kind of everything in between. So don't forget to check that out as well. And then through our social media channels, we push out as much opportunity and content and alumni stories and events and different things as we can to hopefully make it a little easier for you to come into our space and figure out what makes sense for you. I put my email up here as well. I'm happy to follow up. We also have once a month what we call open drop-in hours. So you can just kind of stop by, ask whatever questions you have if we don't get to today, and I'd be happy to talk with all of you in this context or in others. So I guess I see a couple questions in the chat, but please feel free to turn your cameras on or raise your hand or put things in the chat. Let me know what makes what I can do for you and how I can best be of service. I see, Evan, your question, planning to go to law school and interest in art and political science. That's such a wonderful range of opportunities, especially also with a business degree. Leland, way to go being a freshman and really being this early. I think she might have left us. And then Taylor, I see your question about advice for people applying to graduate school that are already working and want to continue working at the same time. So let's start with that, and then other folks, you can send me a direct message, you can raise your hand, whatever makes sense for you. The couple things I would advise you if you need to work full time while you're in graduate school, on the search itself, making sure you look for programs that enable that to happen. Some schools say, nope, no way, the program is too much, we don't want students to be working full time, and you know that if you have to stay working, you need to steer away from those programs. Look for programs that are going to have classes after work hours. Look for programs that have a good support structure, so you're not the only one who is trying to balance work and school. You know, I can think of some here in Washington. There's certainly plenty of other opportunities across the US or across the world. The other place you're going to need to have a good conversation, though, is with your boss. Because if you have a 5:30 class, you can't work until 5:29 unless school is right next door. So being sure they understand that you're going to need to step away at 4:45 to make it to a 5:30 class. You're going to have midterms, you're going to have finals. It's not that you can't balance both. It just takes a lot of intentionality and planning and coffee, to be honest, to balance two intensive things at the same time. And you need to make sure that both the school and your employer understand this new added set of responsibilities that you're taking on. So, you know, I was able to do it. Part of why I was able to do it was because I was on campus. So I had no commute. And, you know, I could leave at 5:28 and make it to a 5:30 class. But it's really important to just plan ahead. What is my opinion of in-person versus hybrid versus completely virtual classes? Without knowing anything about you, I would say some of it is personality driven. Some of it is going to be about why the school is the way it is. So with COVID, a lot of schools pivoted to virtual or they pivoted to hybrid, but others really built the program to be that way on purpose. And so I personally would say that virtual courses or hybrid courses that are built that way on purpose deliver a better experience than when they kind of took an online class and they stuck it up online, because it's just a different way of teaching. It's a different way of learning information. So as you look at different programs, figuring out which one is really going to deliver what you want, because you could spend 2 years doing a virtual program and not get nearly as much out of it than if you kind of rearranged your life to go and do the in-person one. So it's partially just a personal way of how you learn, but also how the school is set up to really convey information and teach, because it's just different in a classroom compared to online. And I'm sure many of you experienced that during COVID as well. Other questions, things you can answer. Evan, thank you. Evan, thank you for turning on your camera. It looks like you have been working very hard on a whiteboard behind you. Other things I can answer.
I have some notes.
Oh, excellent. And I will make sure that the team at SMU has the slides as well. So if you want to revisit any of this, we're happy to do that. And we have a lot of short videos that go in more in depth into some of the stuff that I talked about today. But what else can I answer?
What do you think is one of the most impactful either experiences or programs in political science that you've gone through and have really furthered yourself?
Oh, study abroad, 100%. That was, and I think this is true no matter what you want to study, but it was such an important professional development opportunity. Learning how it is to work in an office where people just make different assumptions about how bosses and staff relate, how coworkers relate, how projects get done, how you manage time. Getting out of my comfort zone as an American to see how the rest of the world does stuff better than us or does stuff not as well as I think we do. You know, getting to eat really awesome things from all over the planet. I mean, so I would say no matter what you want to study or what you want to do professionally, like I said, the world is here. And so going into the world and being a part of it outside of your comfort zone is a really important professional development experience. And I hear this from medical schools who love it when pre-med students have studied abroad. You hear it from law schools, business schools. it's really a critical thing that I think everybody should have the chance to do. And if you think like, there's no way I can afford it or it won't work with my program, we can talk about the many ways to pay for study abroad too, and the many ways to kind of have that experience.
Thank you. I've considered studying abroad, and I went to the pre-law 101 where they discussed the opportunities there. And I am really interested, but it's not practical at this moment for me to just be living in another country, but hopefully next year or the year after that, or even graduate school.
Mm-hmm. And there's lots of things too. You know, there might be a week somewhere close by. There might be a month or a summer program. So there may be other things that are possible. And I know sometimes faculty will say, oh, you couldn't possibly because you would be so far behind. But there's lots of different ways to make it count and continue your academic trajectory with study abroad classes too. So finding somebody who wants to help you make it work, whether it's because you have to work outside, whether you have family obligations, whether you have class obligations, there are many different ways to make it work. So I hope it pans out for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Carmen. And
other folks, Taylor, Drew, Aaliyah, things I can answer for you all?
Is it okay to ask a question out loud?
Please, yes.
Sure. So I'm interested in some graduate programs that offer a combo Masters of Public Policy and MBA. And I'm wondering if you have any advice for applying to a graduate program that doesn't necessarily correspond directly with your undergraduate majors, and how you can kind of best position yourself to be successful in that sort of an application.
Sure. So two things. On the joint degree situation broadly, I would say as you're trying to look for programs, do some careful looking at how the programs are built. Sometimes you'll see ones that happen simultaneously. And in those programs, the key question is, you know, what kind of relationship do the two schools have so that things double count? Do you have to apply to each school and get in? Do you apply to one program and it gets you into both? So for any joint degree program, really looking at how it's built. Some of them are sequential. So you do your 2 years and then you do 2 more. And do you really want to do 4 full years? You know, making sure that the kinds of classes you're going to be taking, the kinds of skills you're going to be building really makes sense. I'm not saying, Drew, this is you, but some folks do dual degrees because they're trying to hedge their bets. And that, you know, they really want one, but they figure they should just get the other. But is that enough? And is it really building the things you want? So that's kind of dual degrees writ large. But on the question of undergraduate major related to graduate school, in many ways, it's going to make perfect sense because it makes perfect sense to you. So take the application committee on the same journey that you've been on. I did my undergraduate degree in biology because these were the questions I really wanted to work on. And now I want to contribute that knowledge about biology to solving public policy questions. I think, you know, the relationship between global health or public health and policy making is very apparent to most people right now. But so maybe, you know, you have to bring them through what you've been through and why the questions you wanted to answer before are different now and what you're hoping to get out of graduate school. And also that can be a great place to talk about what you're able to contribute. So you have this distinct perspective because you majored in art, because you majored in biology, because you majored in underwater basket weaving, whatever, that other people may not have. And so you're really somebody they should want in their classroom because you're going to be able to bring this. So they don't have to relate. You could have studied anything undergrad and go into those fields. You just need to showcase for the committee why it is that this is the right program for the questions you want to answer now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
What was your undergraduate major, just out of curiosity?
I'm actually a freshman, but I'm planning on doing political science.
Excellent. And you're already thinking about a joint MA, MBA. Woo, okay.
Yes, I took a gap year before college, so I had a lot of work experience and hung around lots of people applying to graduate school.
Gotcha. Other things I can answer for you all? again, that's my email in the chat. So if you think of something at 3 o'clock in the morning, okay, well, you can email me at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's fine. And feel free to reach back out. On our next set of office hours are early in November, so you can feel free to come on by or invite somebody else to come on by and ask questions then. And we want to be here to be of help to you. Evan, I'm happy to talk you out of going to law school at any point in time. Just let me know. And so please let us know how we can best be of help to you. And we have lots of tools for other times when questions may pop up.
I'd also be open with at any time you helping me figure out how I could integrate that political science into law and really benefit.
I mean, the kick about law school is making sure that you actually want to practice. If the reason you're going to law school is because you want to be on the policy side, there may be a lot of classes and a lot of coursework that don't help you do that. Because like I said, everybody takes the same 1 year. Everybody takes the same 2nd year. Most people take the exact same 3rd year, and then there's the ability to tweak. So if you're going to spend 3 years of your life learning how to write wills or learning how to do courtroom behavior, and that's not the toolkit that you want, thinking about what the toolkit that you want is if you want to be on the policy side may make way more sense and help you spend all that time and all that energy and all that money in the pursuit of the kinds of skills that you're actually after. There are also lots of law focused degrees that are not JDs, that are not at law schools. So again, grounding it in what is the structure of the program, what is the professional toolkit you're trying to get out of it, what is the longer term, and again, you don't have to know exactly what job, but what is the longer term trajectory that would bring you to that particular program is the litmus test you should put on all of this, whether it's a public policy degree, a law school, an MBA, because that's the heart of it. So if as you look at what you would do in a law school and you're like, okay, I won't need that, I won't need that, I won't need that, I won't need that. Well, that's a lot of time for things that in the direction you're not trying to go. So that's always the lens to put on these things. And the same is true if you're debating between the most famous school you can think of and a school that actually is the right fit for you. That most famous school you can think of it might be totally in the wrong direction. So really grounding it in why do you want to do this and what is the point? Not just the degrees you've heard of or not just the ones that your grandma suggests you go and pursue. And I'm not, ragging on your grandma. I don't know your grandma. I'm sure she loves you, but a lot of times our families only know about certain spaces, even if those spaces may not be the fit for us. So that's my thought on law school. Like, because everyone is going to do the same thing, you'll know exactly what classes you have to take. So if you don't want to go that route, don't go that route.
Thank you. I think I definitely have an interest in politics and getting involved in policy, but I've actually been in constant litigation for the past 6 years, and I think that passing the bar and becoming licensed is a very crucial toolkit for my future, and that's why I was sort of asking you how I could sort of make them both fit, because I think as for now, law is definitely something I'm pointing at.
So, I mean, you know that it makes sense. You know that it's the kind of toolkit you want to do. Yes, if you want to pass the bar, you have to have a JD. That's the way the whole machinery is built. But there's certainly a lot of folks who go back and forth between whether it's by running for office, whether it's by being a staffer, whether it's by supporting a campaign. There are lots of ways to be a practicing attorney and be a part of the political process. So there's lots of folks who go back and forth between the two. The key about the JD is making sure it's actually the thing you want. And it sounds like you've thought about it and that's actually the thing that you want. So well done you. A lot of folks are not at that point. So great. Folks, truly let us know how we can be of assistance. I put a bunch of our tools and resources in the chat, and I'll make sure that Bora has all of those as well as my slides. And then if there's any other things else we can do to be of assistance, let me know. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Carmen.
Bye.